This warning from the CEO of the nation's largest automaker, General Motors, about the impact of the tariffs on the car industry.
Canada's auto sector, General Motors, is dropping electric van production at its plant near London, Ontario.
The government is playing hardball after two automakers dropped some Canadian car production.
General Motors saying today it is ending production of its Bright Drop electric delivery van in Ingersoll, Ontario.
Something unusual is unfolding in Ontario, quietly reshaping the story of Canada's electric future. What was once celebrated as a bold leap into a cleaner, more advanced era has taken an unexpected turn. Not long ago, a billion-dollar investment transformed a small industrial town into a symbol of hope. The Kami Ingersoll plant was meant to spearhead Canada's entry into electric vehicle manufacturing, hailed by politicians as the dawn of a new economic chapter. But today, that same plant has fallen silent. General Motors halted production of its Bright Drop electric vans, leaving hundreds of workers in limbo and raising uncomfortable questions about what went wrong. Across Ontario, suppliers, unions, and local governments moved swiftly to respond. Yet, instead of chaos, the reaction was calm and deliberate. Workers were retrained, contracts restructured, and communities found creative ways to keep their local economies alive. While other countries faced closures and mass layoffs, Canada appeared unusually steady, almost as if it had been preparing for this moment all along. How did that happen? How did a country facing the same global pressures manage to stay grounded while others stumbled? Could this quiet resilience reveal something deeper about Canada's true economic strength? When news broke that GM was suspending Bright Drop production in Ontario, it felt like the start of another industrial collapse. The Kami Ingersoll plant had once symbolized Canada's electric dream, a place where optimism drowned out doubt. But this time, the silence on the factory floor carried a heavier meaning. For many workers, uncertainty wasn't new, but the possibility of a permanent shutdown felt different. It seemed to signal something larger, an economic tremor that began not in Canada, but in Washington. The spark came earlier, when the Trump administration imposed a 25% tariff on vehicles built in Canada. The impact was immediate. Costs soared, parts became harder to source, and production timelines stretched thin. Automakers that once thrived on seamless cross-border trade suddenly faced an equation that no longer worked. GM's internal reports showed the damage clearly. Over $1 billion in tariff costs in just one quarter, with projected annual losses nearing $5 billion. The company was forced to make painful decisions, and the Bright Drop plant became one of the casualties. But while the US market staggered under the strain, Canada's response was measured and strategic. Rather than waiting for panic to spread, Ottawa acted quickly to reinforce the industry. Within weeks, relief programs rolled out, tax credits, supply chain grants, and regional support funds designed to steady the system. Smaller suppliers that once relied heavily on US imports began turning inward, developing domestic parts and reducing dependency on an increasingly volatile American market. Instead of matching Washington's aggression with retaliation, Canada chose stability. That calm, deliberate approach soon set it apart from its neighbors. While American factories struggled with production disruptions, Canadian operations remained surprisingly balanced. What was happening in Ontario wasn't just about tariffs or trade disputes, it was a lesson in adaptation shaped by Canada's own realities. Electric vehicles face unique challenges in cold climates, where sub-zero temperatures can significantly reduce battery range and efficiency. Research by the Canadian Automobile Association found that in temperatures between -7 degrees Celsius and 15 degrees Celsius, EV range can drop anywhere from 14% to 39%. For a delivery van like Bright Drop, that meant missed targets and growing operational issues during winter months. In a country where nearly 2/3 of EV owners report noticeable performance drops in the cold, the environment itself became a major obstacle. Yet Canada didn't treat the cold as a limitation. It treated it as an engineering challenge waiting to be solved. Across Ontario, new startups began experimenting with cold-resistant battery technologies designed to maintain efficiency even in harsh winter conditions. Research labs teamed up with universities, while logistics companies like Purolator and Canada Post began transitioning to hybrid and hydrogen-powered fleets to ensure year-round reliability. What started as a setback quickly evolved into a catalyst for innovation. The same climate that once hindered Canada's electric ambitions was now driving its next wave of breakthroughs. Beneath all these changes was a broader philosophy, one that had quietly guided Canada's industrial policy for years. Rather than reacting to crises after they struck, Ottawa had built what many economists now call a shock absorber economy. The idea was simple: build proactive systems and financial tools that could cushion industries from sudden disruptions. Between 2020 and 2024, Canada attracted more than $46 billion in EV-related investments, supported by over $52 billion in public incentives, the highest among G7 countries relative to GDP. These numbers reflected more than spending. They represented a long-term commitment to building an adaptable economy. Within this framework were several key mechanisms: a $5 billion strategic response fund for tariff-affected companies, a regional manufacturing stabilization program that doubled from $450 million to $1 billion, and a $450 million retraining initiative to help 50,000 workers move into EV and battery-related jobs. Together, these programs created a safety net strong enough to keep industries from collapsing under pressure. The result wasn't just economic stability, it was trust. Workers and companies began to see government policy not as a distant bureaucracy, but as a living system that moved with them. That trust proved invaluable when global markets shifted, allowing Canada's manufacturing base to stay resilient while others struggled to recover. Meanwhile, south of the border, the story was very different. In the United States, General Motors faced mounting financial pressure, absorbing roughly $4.5 billion in additional costs due to tariffs and spending another $4 billion reorganizing supply chains while navigating domestic political hurdles. What was once seen as a symbol of American industrial strength had now become trapped in a storm of shifting policies, rising production costs, and unpredictable regulations. Analysts began referring to Canada as General Motors' stability zone, a market where operations could continue with fewer disruptions, supported by steady energy prices, predictable policies, and lower logistics costs. That stability created a ripple effect across Ontario. Major projects like Volkswagen's St. Thomas battery facility and Stellantis LG Energy Solutions' massive Windsor plant began to anchor a growing network of suppliers and skilled workers, the kind of industrial ecosystem that companies like GM could still rely on. The region was quickly transforming into a manufacturing hub that stood in sharp contrast to the volatility south of the border. While the US industry wrestled with uncertainty, Canada's transition to electric vehicles pressed ahead with deliberate momentum. This wasn't reactionary policymaking, it was a conscious reinvention. The shutdown of the Bright Drop plant became a moment of clarity rather than collapse, forcing both policymakers and executives to confront the risks of relying too heavily on a single export market. The lesson was clear: Canada's industrial future could no longer depend solely on US demand. That realization fueled an ambitious new vision to create a fully integrated, made-in-Canada EV ecosystem. From mining to manufacturing, the country began building a seamless value chain stretching from the mineral-rich north to the export-ready ports of the Atlantic coast. Resources like nickel, lithium, and cobalt, once shipped overseas for processing, were now being refined at home to feed the national EV network. By keeping extraction, processing, and production within its borders, Canada reduced its vulnerability to global market swings while gaining long-term control over its own resources. Public investment in this transition even outpaced private spending by nearly 14%, signaling a strategic shift toward independence rather than foreign reliance. In Ontario, this transformation was most visible. Cities like Windsor, St. Thomas, and Alliston, once known mainly for assembly line production, were evolving into hubs for materials science, battery research, and advanced technology. Universities, startups, and global corporations began working hand in hand, forming clusters of expertise that strengthened the province's industrial backbone. What had started as a traditional auto manufacturing region was now emerging as one of North America's leading clean tech corridors. Beyond the continent, Canada's ambitions were reaching eastward. New partnerships with the European Union opened doors to green trade and carbon-neutral battery exports. Under these frameworks, Canada positioned itself as a trusted supplier, capable of offering transparent, low-emission supply chains. A key advantage for European markets increasingly focused on sustainability and traceability. This eastward expansion marked a significant shift in Canada's economic geography, allowing the country to diversify its trade relationships and reduce its long-standing dependence on the United States. But the implications went far deeper than trade numbers. By focusing on autonomy and resilience, Canada was quietly redrawing the industrial map of North America. The continent's manufacturing future may no longer orbit solely around Detroit or Texas, but around Ontario and Quebec, regions that have turned economic pressure into innovation. It's a story of quiet transformation, one driven not by grand speeches or headlines, but by steady, strategic decision-making. The bright drop pause, rather than signaling decline, became a test of endurance. A real-world demonstration of how effectively a nation could absorb shocks without losing momentum. Each layer of response, from government policy to corporate adaptation, revealed a level of coordination rarely seen in modern industrial economies. While the United States continues to navigate protectionist policies and deep political divides, Canada has maintained a steady course, keeping jobs secure, production stable, and investor confidence strong. The results are becoming increasingly visible. General Motors remains committed to its Canadian operations, a clear sign of faith in the country's workforce and the infrastructure that sustains it. Economists now describe the Canadian model as one of the most successful examples of economic shock absorption in the Western world. Its strength isn't built on luck or short-term advantage. It's built on consistency, cooperation, and foresight. Please subscribe to the Timefold channel, and don't forget to like.